What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Spark to Fire. I'm your host, Landon Rhodes, and today I've got the founder of Hydro Flask, Travis Rosbach. Thank you for coming on the show, bro. It's good to see you.
Landon, thanks for having me. This is so cool.
Yeah, man, this is awesome. I'm so glad we got connected, and I have tons of questions for you, so I want to jump right into this. But before I do that, I would love if you could give a little bit of a your bio. I noticed there was a lot of different things that you've done. You've flown planes commercially. You were a U.S. merchant marine boat captain. So you're technically Captain Travis Rosbach. So I would just love if you could just give us a little bit of information about who you are, and then we'll dive into how you were like as a kid.
What are you doing here, Travis? Yeah, for sure. So Travis Rosbach, I grew up in Salem, Oregon, and my mom was a single parent up until I was about 5. She married my stepdad, who just got out of Vietnam and Agent Orange and drugs and alcohol. And he was kind of he was having a rough time, and we were having a rough time. And then about 12 years old, my mom divorced, and I met my dad when I was 14. And I should back up. At 12, inherited my neighbor's bookshelf with a lot of business books on it. That was kind of a big pivoting point of my life. I spent a lot of time in Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, Wayne Dyer, all those guys. And actually I can say guys, because there really weren't any women that I know of that was in that collection. Now that I think about that.
And not back then in that era, I would say even.
Yeah, it was a male dominated sport, really, you know, now that I kind of think, wow, I've never really thought about this, but yeah, all those guys. So I started like really getting into business when I was 12. And then when I was 14, I had an opportunity to go down to the US Virgin Islands, go meet my dad, who had multiple scuba diving shops.
Wow.
And I mean, I grew up watching Jacques Cousteau every Sunday and just dreaming of palm trees and fish and being under the water. And I never really had any idea about, how I could do that. But then when I was 14, it was like, oh yeah, here's a plane ticket, go do that. And so went down there, got certified, fell in love with the Caribbean, St. Croix in particular, being under the water. So I made multiple attempts to just live down there, but my grades weren't good enough. So I had to come back to Salem to graduate. 18, I moved right back down a couple days after high school. Became a dive instructor, PADI, scuba dive instructor, dive master. Then I got my 25-ton merchant marine captain's license, then moved up to 50-ton, worked on parasail boats, dive boats, yachts.
Wow.
I don't like doing fishing. I didn't do any fishing boats. I don't believe in killing the animals, to tell you the honest truth. And then it hit me one day. I'm a pilot. So I took off and became a pilot right around 9/11 and moved back home to the Virgin Islands and flew for Seabourn Airlines, flying seaplanes, St. Croix, St. Thomas, Puerto Rico. Moved up to Florida and started flying jets, Lear jets, Hawkers, Falcons, Gulfstreams, Citations, things like that. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And also skydivers. Flying skydivers was probably the most dangerous fun that flying anyway. Yeah, I flew all kinds of stuff, and then got into business. And I always had a real calling to work for myself and do business. And so I had a girlfriend at the time. We moved back home to Bend and started a fence company, Bend Fencing. Sold it, moved off to Hawaii, started a sign and banner company, Oahu Signs and Screen Printing. Sold it, started Hydro Flask, double wall vacuum insulated water bottle company. Grew that, sold it, took off all around the planet, and bought a bunch of property, started homesteading and logging and doing all that. And but I got kind of I really missed doing business. So I started the Tumalo Group to start doing more business advising and helping people grow their brands and their businesses. And I just love business. I can't get enough of it.
Yeah,
So that's why I did the Tumalo Group. And then here I am with you.
that's awesome. So there's some very pivotal milestones that we just like glossed over there. And obviously we're going to dig deeper into all of those. So your first company was in fencing. You were selling fence, installing fence too, I'm guessing, like the full shebang.
Yeah. Yeah. My first real business, we had a real estate company in Florida, but it was really not worth talking about. It was kind of not a big deal. um, Yeah, yeah. I had a rental house when we first got back to Bend, and one night we were sitting there drinking a bottle of wine, talking about what are we going to do, and we had no clue what we were going to do. This was circa probably 2006, late 2005.
Okay.
And there was a guy who just came into our yard. He was out back, and I was like, what's up? What are you doing here, man? You're in my backyard. And he's like, oh yeah, we're doing this fence. And he showed me he's doing metal posts and these beautiful clear cedar boards that had no knots. And I was like, this is beautiful. I mean, you guys are doing great work. Are you doing all of these subdivisions? Because Bend was going from a sleepy little town to a mega metropolis that it is today.
Right.
And I was like, well, surely you're doing all of these subdivisions. He's like, nah, man, we just do one-offs. I said, well, do you mind if I do that? And he's like, okay, dude.
Go for whatever. It, bro.
That's all you, man. And I was like, cool. So I went back inside. I told my girlfriend, I was like, hey, I think we should do this. She's like, cool. So the next day we went up to Portland, bought a bunch of fencing supply tools and stuff, and started recruiting the best fence builders in town.
Love it.
Yeah.
And how old were you? How old were you at this time?
I was born in 78. So 88, 98, 08. So 30, 28.
Okay.
27, 28 years old.
Gotcha. I'm 29 right now, so I'm trying to put myself in that position. That's super cool. So
it's a lot of work doing fences though, man. Like
it is.
I don't know that I would necessarily do a fence company again.
That's funny. So in terms of like our recording order at Spark to Fire, I just had Matt Warner on, who owns Empire Netting and Fence. So we're on a big fencing hit right now too. So he'll love this. And so you built that company up, and then you eventually sold that company, you said. So what was like the catalyst for you to sell that company? Obviously a lot of work. What else like led you to sell it?
Well, there were a few things. Like it was a lot of fun. It was we had a really good crew. We had about 25 predominantly Mexican employees, and we were like a family. Like we were close, tight knit.
Super cool.
Really, really good crew. They could kind of self-regulate who was working and who wasn't working, and who fit the what do we call this culture, and who didn't. And we were doing really well. But it was February, and my back was sore, and my body was sore, and I was just ready for some tropics again. And so I called my partner and I was like, look, I got to go to Mexico or Hawaii. I'm about ready to die or kill somebody, but I'm just like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
And she called back and she's like, okay, come get your bags. You're off to Hawaii. And I was like, okay, I'm not really sure what that means though. Like I've never been to Hawaii. I didn't know. Okay. It's a state. Yeah, I know that. Islands. Yeah, I know that. Oahu, Honolulu. Okay. Landed in Honolulu. And as soon as the door opened, I felt the aloha and I was like, I'm home. And I called her and I said, look, you can keep the business or you can sell it. But either way, I live here now. She's like, are you drunk? Where are you? Who are those people in the background? I said, no, I'm still on the airplane. I haven't even got off the plane yet. I know I live here. So I did my vacation. I went back and we sold the business like 2 weeks later, and everything was just going straight up. This is right prior to 2008.
Wow.
And so everything was just on an upward trajectory. So we tapped out and we pulled the ripcord and just bolted, moved over to Maui first. And I loved Maui, but I really enjoy Oahu more. And so we moved over to Oahu, and kind of another one of those, like, what do we do? Okay. Screen printing, signs, banners. Everybody had like a cousin who had a plotter and they did signs.
Right.
And there was huge competition. But I found this, they had just come out, well, not just, but kind of just had come out with these affordable digital printers that you could print like big stuff, like 65, 64 inch, big plotters and big printers. So we took off to Florida, went to a trade show. I went and talked to Frank Fellers Frank Feller. He has this company called Fellers that is a supply company for print shops. I was like, Frank, I want to do a sign company. He's like, okay, well, how much experience do you have? I said, well, none. I mean, today's my first day. What do we buy?
What do I do here?
Yeah. And he's like, oh man. I said, hey, we're in Hawaii also. And he's like, oh, okay. I want to come out to Hawaii. So yeah, let's hook him up. So they took us around and showed us what we needed to do. And we opened up the boxes a few weeks later and started Oahu Signs and Screen Printing right downtown Honolulu. Started picking up the MMA, just started to kind of be a thing.
Uh-huh.
And so we were very fortunate. We got to work with Dahui and BJ Penn and some of the big MMA fighters that do conventions at the convention center, the Blaisdell, just around the corner from us.
Wow.
We were the one-stop shop for all of that, which is so fun.
Wow. So you immediately acquired a huge customer right off the bat.
Yeah.
I'm starting to notice a pattern, and like we'll kind of get into this when we talk about Whole Foods, but I'm starting to notice like a pattern with you where like you have this, you see this dream of a company, and then like the very next step you take, you kind of discover like, okay, that could be a massive customer. And then you like latch on to that massive customer, and it's not necessarily like a slow build for you from what I'm seeing. It's like you start this thing and then like, boom, there's success and there's a lot of it. And so tell me about that. Like what ended up happening with the screen printing and sign company?
Well, it was going really well. I mean, it was an agency. We kind of morphed into like an agency, starting brands, helping brands, growing a lot of t-shirt companies and clothing companies. But then we also had like huge, big sign, outdoor billboard type signs also. That was just like, no idea how we got there, but that was cool. And then one day I remember it very clearly. I was standing at the copy machine, and I just got, all of a sudden I got this sinking feeling. I was like, it's all over. Like it's done. And I didn't know what that meant, but I felt almost like sick. And I was like, something just happened. And that's, I think it was like either that night or the very next day, we learned that the stock market had crashed, and 2008 had just kicked in.
Wow.
And so we basically just started doing like a fire sale and just, sell, just, liquidate, get out. And, but we were living on the North Shore and surfing a lot. And, which, that was kind of like always my favorite thing to do, is either scuba dive or go surfing. And so I was like, well, how can we do something in the surf world, and the water world? Like how can we maintain living here on the North Shore? And that's when Hydro Flask like came in and started Hydro Flask.
So you told a story on another show that I listened to, where you were kind of like, you were sitting on the beach and you were looking at like an old thermos, like the old school thermoses that were,
right up here, yeah.
You got it. Can you pull it down and show the audience, or is it mounted to the wall?
Yeah, no, I can get it. Stand by.
Yeah. Yes. Love it. Look at this thing. A relic of time.
15 pounds. I swear, it's so heavy.
So heavy. Yeah.
All rusted and nasty and stuff. This was my grandpa's. This was the original thermos that when I thought about like thermoses, I thought hot coffee.
Right.
And the thing stinks. You open it up and it's just like, ugh. But the concept was awesome. Besides the 422 pounds. And I was like, well, why can't we just do this, but with a water bottle? And nobody was doing that. So we did.
And what year exactly? So you're sitting on the beach and you were looking down at that and you're like, why can't we just do this with water bottles? Is that the exact thought?
Well, I didn't have that but that was my memory when I thought about, so we were there on the beach. Yes. And well, it's kind of a multiple facets. The
Right.
first thing that happened was I did a delivery to a store in Honolulu for the sign company, and I was thirsty, so I went into the sporting goods store to go get a Nalgene water bottle because that's what I knew from my rock climbing days, and
Mm-hmm.
that's all I knew. That's all we really had, and there were no Nalgenes. The whole wall was empty. All the shelves were bare. I think there was like 3 left. And I asked, I was like, what happened here? You know, what's going on? And they said, well, we're not really sure what it is, but it's called BPA. And, you know, like it's going to be this bad deal. I said, well, who's going to fill up this shelf? And the guy's like, nobody. I say, and it just came out. I will do that. And the guy laughed at me. But from the time that it came out of my mouth and the time he laughed at me, I very clearly saw myself up on stage about 10 years later talking about this highly successful water bottle company.
You saw that vision.
Yeah.
Wow. Dude, that's
Yeah.
so cool.
I mean, and what was the trip is I was at Berkeley, I don't know, about 10 years later, and I'm standing there looking down going, what am I doing wearing a suit? Like I got a jacket on. This isn't me. I don't wear jackets. And I realized, oh, this is the vision I had 10 years ago when I was wearing a jacket. Because when I saw myself wearing a jacket, I was like, I don't know. That doesn't really sound like me wearing a jacket. Like, I don't think I'm going to be wearing a suit in 10 years. Sure enough, that was it.
That was you. That's awesome. So that is eerily similar to your whole food story, which is very fascinating. And we'll get into that in a little bit later. So you walk into this place and they said there's BPA in these water bottles and we're going to take them all down, or they already took them all down.
Yeah, they were all gone. Yeah.
Wow. So you go, what do you do next? Like you basically kind of made this promise to this guy that I'm going to be the guy that fills this wall back up, and you now have to get to work.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you know, it was like, I remember when he laughed at me, I kind of looked at him like kind of in a fog. Like I too was kind of like laughing at myself for having heard someone say that, you know, like that didn't make any sense to me either. But at the same time, I realized that he didn't know what he didn't know. And he didn't know what I knew, which is in 10 years from now, I'm going to be wearing a stupid suit up on stage talking about this.
Yeah.
So I left. I was like, okay, thanks, dude. And I did buy them because I was thirsty. So I bought the last 2, went back to the sign company. I always like to hire people and work with people who are younger than me because they're hip and cool and they know what's trending. And so I went and asked the hip, cool, trending people at the sign company, what do I do? And the only thing that they could come up with was this aluminum water bottle. And so I was like, okay, good. You know, at least there's options now. So I went and I paid like stupid money. It was like $20 for a water bottle. And which at the time was like ridiculous. I couldn't believe I was paying that much. And it was not cool. I couldn't get ice cubes in it. It couldn't go in the freezer. I couldn't put hot in it. It sweated. And then to top it off, what really upset me was one day I dropped it from like only a couple feet and it dented, and like it just didn't look cool anymore. It just the paint, the powder coat flaked off, and I just wasn't stoked on it as much.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed. And about a week later, I'm drinking out of it, and I realized that there's some of the gold liner had flaked off at some point, and I didn't know where it was. And I was like, oh, geez. I lived in Australia, kind of a whole separate side story. When I lived in Australia, there was a story about people who evidently keep birds in their houses, in their kitchens, and the birds were dying, and they linked it over to this stuff that they were heating on their skillet, like Teflon, or I don't know what it was.
Oh, wow.
And the fumes from this coating was killing these birds. And so my first thought was that coating is now potentially inside of me. I might have drank it. I don't know what's going on. What is this stuff?
Yeah.
So I found the number. They're out in New York. I called them. I asked them about it, and they were really rude. They were like, no, we're not telling you. We don't have to tell you. That's none of your business. And they pretty much hung up on me. And I remember thinking, like, that's not the definition of customer service. Like, no. That's not what I wanted to hear. And it's like, okay, now I really am getting serious about it. I called my brother. He just started working at REI here in Bend. They just opened. And I asked him, and he's like, hey, there's this brand new metal single wall bottle. You're going to love it. Best bottle ever. So I got one, drank out of it. It dribbled all over my face and down my shirt. I was like, I got to learn how to drink, I guess.
This is the best.
And it too was just not suiting my needs. Like we would go to the beach and put it in the sand, go surf, come back, and it'd be too hot to drink and it'd burn. And it just was like, I don't like this. And it's still, every single time I drink out of it, it'd go all over my chin and all over my shirt.
Everybody can relate to that. I'm sure everyone right now is thinking like, oh yeah, I've definitely had one of those crappy water bottles that does that. And like everyone, and you look silly. You're walking around with this big water stain on you. Yeah.
It was like, and it kind of defeated the purpose because the water was so hot. I couldn't really drink it,? And so it's like, well, why did I even bring water if I still have to go to the stupid drinking fountain? Like this isn't cool. There's got to be a better option, but there just wasn't. So yeah, those were the big driving, propelling forces. And then I realized that, oh yeah, I had this thermos here.
Yeah.
That was my grandpa's. And instead of doing glass and metal and something so big and so heavy, why don't we just make this a better version of this, but make it into something that this is actually cool.
And at this time, were there any other competitors of yours around that you found, or were you were truly first at this?
Yeah, no, there were none. There was the single wall company, but that was it.
Wow. So fascinating. So you obviously had to take a lot of the risks being the pioneer for this. So what did you do to make this product? Like what was the process of manufacturing the very first one? And how did that go?
Well, the first thing that we could go on for days about this. But basically I knew that I needed to get over to China. There was just no option in the United States to do what I kind of really wanted to do. And so I booked a flight to Shanghai and I used the sign and banner company money to go to Shanghai. And I got in and found a factory and nope, we just do plastic. I'm like, oh, I flew clear over here
Great.
To meet you guys. And you said you did metal water bottles and you were just kidding. That's not funny. And I'm just getting ready to leave. And I was kind of, I was quite upset, honestly, because it was no small feat to get myself to Shanghai in, 2008. And, and this guy came up and kind of like grabbed my arm. He's like, hey man, I got a cousin. He's down in Hangzhou. You should go talk to him. He might be able to hook you up. I'm like, I don't know what that means, but okay, I will do that. How do I do that? And he gives me 2 pieces of paper, one how to get to the train station and one how to get to Hangzhou. And I took those 2 papers and I went to the taxi outside and I gave him the one and he goes, no. I'm like, you don't go to the train station? He's like, no. And I gave him the wrong one. Like he doesn't drive to Hangzhou. I'm like, oh, how about this one? He's like, oh, okay. Okay, good. So it's the train station, get to Hangzhou. And I realized I'm the only white guy in like 8 million people here at the train station. And I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know who I'm looking for or what's going on. Wow. And, I kind of got one of those kind of, oh boy, Travis, what have you done this time? And this woman came up and she's like, Travis, I'm Natalie. Let's go. I'm like, all right, cool. So we spent a few weeks, her husband, Michael, and I went all over the metal area of China and just asked every factory if they would take a chance on a double wall vacuum insulated water bottle. And the vast majority said no. There's no such thing as that. That's not going to happen. It's not possible. There weren't enough vacuums at that time. There was not enough, we couldn't rent time at those vacuums because they didn't believe in the product or that it would work or sell. And after about 5 days, 3 to 5 days later, I remember very clearly the guy, he kind of shook his head like, that's different. Never heard of that before, but he says, yeah, we could try that. And that's how we got our factory, and we got a couple samples and off to the races.
Wow. So you get your first one back. Is it everything that you dreamed of, or was it pretty whack?
It was a hybrid of whack and cool.
Yeah.
I had spent a lot of time picking up every single drinking device on the island of Oahu and Shanghai and Japan and everywhere in between that I would stop. And so I knew like the mouth size, the diameter, the height, the thickness, I knew how many ounces the average person has in their mouth at any given time of liquid. And like I did all of that research. And so when I was back in Hawaii, and we got 2 samples, an 18 and a 21 ounce. And I didn't like them. They felt tinny, sharp. The mouth was sharp. The corners were sharp. It felt kind of thin. It was just like, I don't like this very much. Put ice cubes in it, and by golly, it worked. And so we took those and had a buddy who was doing photography. He was like a professional surf photographer. And he's like, yeah, I'll get you a bunch of pictures, and, like $80,000, and I'll get you a bunch of pictures. Like, yeah, no. Went to Costco, bought a camera, and just went around Oahu, giving them, handing the 2 samples to every beautiful person that we could find of every age and demographic, and just like average people and beautiful people and normal people, and just got a ton of pictures and asked them what they thought. And they were all stoked and excited and wanted to buy them. And we took those pictures and ordered the first 3,000, which was the minimum order quantity. And ran out of money and had to buy only 1,500 of them in the end. But that's kind of how it started.
Did you go back with all of your edits and your renditions after you got your first sample? Obviously, like you went and got the product right, or did you actually go straight to market with it to make money?
No, we went straight to market.
Wow.
Yeah. Like it was.
You knew it wasn't perfect yet, but you were just like, right, we need to make money. It's time to go.
Yeah, well, because I knew it wasn't perfect. I don't like the word perfect. It wasn't up to my expectations, but nobody else that we showed it to had my expectations. They had no expectations. And so I gave them a little, and they thought that was a lot, but they didn't know what was in my mind. And so we went through 3,000 and then another 10,000. And then the next order was, so we went 1,500, which were the very, very first version, another 10,000 of the very first version. I think we might've done one more 20,000 piece order of the first version. And then we went to a new version, and then the next 20,000, basically, the first year and a half, 2 years, we had probably about 4 versions.
Wow. So you were selling by the thousands though, early in the game. What was your technique to get these sold? And then I want to talk about your very first one, but first, what was your technique to getting the first, like even 1,500 units sold?
Well, as far as I could see was the Portland Saturday market. Like I knew that Hydro Flask was going to be the greatest water bottle of all time. Like I knew that people were going to drink water. That was kind of why I got called to do it, was just to help hydrate the masses. Mm-hmm. And yet I didn't have all of the business acumen.
Yeah. So you didn't like have
I don't even have the bloody language, right? Like I didn't know what I didn't know. I just knew that this was it. This was the bottle. And so went up to the Portland Saturday market, and they even told us no. They're like, no, you can't sell that in here. Nobody wants to buy that. Wow. And they put us out by the railroad tracks, and we set up a little card table and just started hawking water bottles. And it was hot, and they worked. People had never seen that. The next weekend, people were lined up around the block, and the manager of the market, her name was Mona. She got a little pissed. She's like, what are you people doing here standing in front of my door? They're like, we're here for the water bottles.
Oh my God.
She's like, what? So she came out. She's like, hey, Trav, you want to move into the market? I'm like, I don't know. We're doing pretty good out here on the railroad tracks. But yeah, we moved into the Portland Saturday market, and pretty soon, like within a few weeks, people were coming from Washington and Oregon all over the place to buy these
Wow.
bottles. And in between the markets, it was the summertime. And so we'd go to Drake Park and do Munchin Music or, movie in the park or whatever that, kind of a festivity here in Bend. And the Bend Bulletin newspaper came and did an article on us and put us on the front page of the business about this new startup company. The following week after that article came out, dude walks up and he's like, "Hey, I saw you in the paper." It's like, "Oh, I didn't even know that really came out. Okay, cool. What's up?" And he goes, "Hey, I'm a sales rep." Don't really know what that means, but okay. And he goes, "I want to start selling bottles." I'm like, "Okay, what does that mean?" He goes, "Well, I need 24 of them to start." I'm like, "Okay, well, that'll be," and I told him the price. He's like, "No, I'm a sales rep. You give those to me for free." I was like, "I don't give out free bottles." And he goes, "Yeah, you do. I'm a sales rep." I was like, "Oh, okay." So we negotiate and I give him the bottles, and it was a big blind leap of faith. And he called the next Monday and he's like, "How many do you have left?" Gave him the inventory and he's like, "Those are mine. They're already sold." And he started getting them into the stores. Backing up though, I had already opened up Whole Foods. And so like Saturday market was awesome, but I got us into Whole Foods the very first day that we got the bottles.
It's huge. Wow. The very first day that you got the bottles?
Yeah. Well,
So
the very first
super.
day we got them to Bend, we got them originally, they went into my grandparents' house in Salem. And we were doing the Saturday market from Salem and my
Oh my gosh.
grandparents' garage. But then we outgrew my grandparents' garage. My grandpa was getting pissed. He's like, "Hey, man, we got to put the cars in there." Like, all right. So we moved over to Bend and put them in my mom's shed. And um, it was like, "Oh, wow, we don't have enough room in this shed for 1,500 bottles." So I went down to Whole Foods. So the very first day they came to Bend, I went to Whole Foods with them to try to get rid of them so we could have room in the shed.
That's awesome. So you were actually telling me right before we started recording that something similar happened with those Nalgene bottles or with basically the plastic bottles that were hanging up. So tell that story real quick for the audience, because I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. So I went into Whole Foods and I said, "Hey, I've got these water bottles here for sale." And the woman said, "Okay, yeah, go talk to Cheryl," or whatever her name was. And went over to Cheryl and I said, "Hey, I got these water bottles." And she goes, "Those aren't water bottles. Those are like cans. What are you talking about?" Like she thought I had like water
Plastic
in a
water
bottle,
bottles.
like
Yeah.
plastic water. And she's like, "No, go talk to Evan. He might be able to help you." So I go over, I find Evan. He's literally laying on the floor, pulling the SIG bottles off the shelf, and he was livid. They had lied. There was BPA, that same aluminum one that I had bought in a Honolulu, or it was on the North Shore, but the same aluminum bottle that I had drank out of, and I had called them and they were like, "Get out of here, kid. You're bugging me." He was there on the floor pulling those off of the shelf.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
was like, "Good timing, dude, because here I am with the replacement." He goes, "Is there BPA?" I said, "Of course not." He's like, "All right, I'll take them all." And I'm like, "Well, you can't have all of them, but I'll give you, here's some to replace." And so he was taking SIG off and putting Hydro Flask on at the same time. And once he got Whole Foods, it's kind of like off to the races from there.
Game over. Man, that's so cool. So you made it a point though to go after a big fish right from the beginning, because you knew it'd make life easier if you got into that store. And so talk about the growth from that point forward. You get into Whole Foods, you get a couple thousand units sold. What happens after that point?
Well, the sales reps really started taking off. One sales rep has another buddy who's a sales rep, who has another buddy who's a sales rep. And then there's a group of sales reps. And then pretty soon you've got 20 sales reps and you don't know what you don't know. And then they teach you and, you learn, and they're selling bottles all over the country. And one of the big things that we did really well and really right was go to outdoor retail show. And that's like a big trade show for the outdoor industry. All of the not, I shan't say all, but a lot of the buyers from the outdoor world come to outdoor retail show to buy their products for the next season.
Mm-hmm.
And we set up a little 10 by 10 bamboo booth. And being from Hawaii, that's all we kind of really knew. It was cheap and we could lash it together. Well, the lights were really hot and the bamboo would crack and it sounded like gunshots. And so people were like ducking and running and taking cover because they thought we were shooting. Like there was a mass shooting inside the convention center.
It's just rogue marketing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Once security kind of, said, okay, yeah, like you guys obviously aren't shooting. You just made a bad choice in booth. Like people started to come to see what the commotion was because there was quite a commotion around this Hydro Flask booth that is popping off rounds inside.
Literally popping off today.
Yeah. And
that's awesome.
Like we had ice inside of them and people are looking at the ice going like, this is black magic. Like this is witchcraft stuff. Like, what are you doing here? And then we'd open up, 20 or 30 stores and they had, 5 doors or 1 door or 100 doors and distributors started coming in, more sales reps started coming in. And we just went straight retail straight away. It wasn't until much later that we finally started doing kind of like web presence and Amazon and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And you're one of the rare companies that went from a product that just, simply people drink water out of to becoming a fashion accessory and like becoming an iconic brand. I mean, people literally buy these and carry them around as a status symbol. And I'm just curious, isn't that nuts? That's so crazy to think about.
Yeah. Cheers.
Yeah. So did you have any idea that would have happen, or is it completely organic and you had no clue it would happen like that?
Kind of both. I had a very strong call. Like I had a very, almost like word perfect blueprint laid out for me. And I still can't quite, it's still kind of like, I get emotional when I think about it. It kind of gives me like goosebumps and chills and stuff. I was here to hydrate the masses, and that's what it was. Like I wanted to instill in our customers and in our employees and in our, everybody we came into contact with that this is not a water bottle. This is a Hydro Flask. You're not drinking out of a water bottle. Anybody can make a water bottle. We've made a Hydro Flask. I wanted to be like, Q-tip. I wanted to be Kleenex. I wanted to be Speedo.
Yep.
And I wanted to be Hydro Flask. But it wasn't a want. It wasn't like I'm going to get. It was, Travis, here is the Hydro Flask. And so it was always sort of built in that it's in the DNA. The DNA was this is the number one water bottle on the planet.
Yeah.
And here we are,
And people started to bear witness that. I mean, like having people line up to a trade show, not even a trade show tent, but your farmer's market tent when it was completely off the beaten path. You're over by railroad tracks. It's loud, it's noisy. And how many people were in line that day? Like the longest day?
Probably 25, 30 people.
You just can't conceptualize that. 25, 30 people waiting in line to buy one product for, and specifically somebody to drink water out of. Something you would have never thought about that years ago. So if you had to really break down what you did to make this such a cult following type of product, what other than the innovation did you do? Did you have any sort of tactics at play when you were building this brand to scale it so quickly? Or how did that work for you?
Yeah, I knew I didn't have any like MBA or business degree. I did some college just so I could fly for the airlines. But then once I started flying for the airlines, I stopped doing college because, why would I wanted to fly. I didn't want to do school. So I knew that I I knew that I had a lot to learn, but I also wasn't limited by anybody else's definition of, proper business or how to do a business. I was just running and shooting from the hip. And um, yeah, I mean, it was just, I, throw it all out there and just see what sticks. And if it works, do more of that. And if
Yeah.
it doesn't work, oh gosh, let's just hope we don't get in trouble, you know? And that
Yeah.
was kind of the game plan from day one, was just get everybody a bottle. As soon as they use it, they will understand that they feel better because they're now hydrated. So a lot of people, for the first time in their whole lives, they've been drinking pop, beer, juice, whatever else they're drinking, but nobody's really walking around with water. You'd see big gulps, big 44-ounce
Right.
Pepsi, and like, secretaries would be sipping out of that all day. But nobody was really drinking water. People started drinking water. They started feeling better. They came back to buy more and buy more and buy more.
That's good. So you tied your product to a specific behavior and a habit that made people feel better.
And I studied Coca-Cola. How is Coca-Cola so successful? Well, there's this thing called cradle to the grave. If they can get you when you're young, they can get you all the way until you die.
Right.
Okay, well, how can we implement cradle to grave? I studied cults. I studied
did you study mass movements? There's a book, a red book. I think that you're familiar with.
Yep. I studied all of it. I studied, propaganda. I spent a lot of time in the propaganda capital of the world. How are they propagandaing people to believe that this way of life is the best?
Yeah.
Even though it's not, because I knew that drinking water was a really good way to do it. So I'm not selling anything nefarious. I'm selling something that's going to make you feel better.
Right.
So if I can use their tricks not against them, it wasn't that we're not against communism. Well, anyway, we won't go on that topic. But I'm selling good stuff, man. Like, drink water, feel better. And here's the propaganda from here over to here. And then there you have it.
What books were so good that you read them twice?
Mostly Brian Tracy. I think Brian Tracy books, as a cat, like as an author, but he's, kind of maybe as a category, a lot of Brian Tracy. And in those days, we also had Red Bull. Red Bull was cool. I mean, they were hip and awesome. So was Monster energy drink, had just come out. Okay, what are they doing? How do I replicate what they're doing? Because I knew that they're spending millions and millions of dollars to pick out the exact right color green, the exact location to sponsor an event. So you see, okay, well, they're going to be out at the Telluride Film Festival. All right, boom, we got us a 10 by 10 booth at the Telluride Film Festival. We're going to be there. We're going to put up a booth. We're going to sell Hydro Flask. So it's kind of like the McDonald's and Burger King mentality. McDonald's goes in, Burger King goes in across the street.
Yep.
Red Bull.
Yeah,
exactly. Red Bull's doing it. We're there. The single wall company is going to be over there. Yep. That's exactly where we're going.
Yep.
The single wall company sells at that location. Okay. I'm calling that manager and I'm sending out bottles and we're going to be selling in that location.
So good.
Which causes a lot of disruption and knockoffs and things like that. But could we be upset because they were hydrating the masses with us? So that's cool.
Yeah. That's so cool. I love that. Any final pieces of advice to young entrepreneurs that are getting started that want to see some of the similar success that you had?
I think really just start, like you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have school. But if you've got passion and you've got an idea or you've got a calling, even better, just start, just go do, and act boldly, and unseen forces will come to your aid. I firmly believe that. I've seen that over and over and over again in my life, that just do it. Just take one step towards what you want. And then the second, third, fourth step will just happen. And then pretty soon you're going to be so much further down the path that those hard times of starting will just be a distant memory.
That's good, man. Bottle that up. That was a solid ending quote. Yeah, this has been such a special time here, man. I would love to. I want to cap off the story of Hydro Flask though. Like, how did things end? So if you could just give us like a 30-second like spiel of what happened. You were running this company, scaling this company. You guys were doing like 14 million in annual revenue, and then what happened? What happened after that?
This season was over. I related a lot over to when I was flying, and
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to fly the seaplanes, but I had a list of airplanes that I wanted to fly. As soon as I flew all those airplanes and those jets, it just wasn't as exciting anymore. Like I kind of needed a new fix. I needed to go back into traveling, and the season was just over. It was time to move on. I knew that we were in good hands, and the owner promised that he wasn't going to fire anybody, and he wasn't going to, unnecessarily anyway, he wasn't going to leave Bend, and he was going to, they gave me the blueprint for what they were
Yeah.
going to do, and they wanted me to stay. And I said, I just don't want to stay. I want to go do something else now.
So cool. Man, I just love your spirit. This has been so awesome talking to you. I love how just like carefree and yet intense at the same time that you are. This has been a real pleasure. So thank you, Travis.
Well, thank you. It's been good talking to you. I love your show, and so to be here with you is really an honor. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Guys, that's going to do it for this episode of Spark to Fire. If you love this show as much as I did, make sure that you guys leave it a review on Apple, specifically on Apple Podcast and Spotify. You can both rate and review the shows there. And that's how we get more awesome people like Travis on the show. And guys, just make sure you go revisit this episode, because there's so much I took personally from this that I know that's going to help me grow my business. So exciting stuff. Thank you again, man.
Thank you, Landon. It's good to be here.